The sound of my own daughter's hand cracking across my cheek was the loudest thing I'd ever heard, even louder than the wedding bells that had just rung for her. But what truly silenced the entire room was the moment I looked her dead in the eye and began to laugh. Hi everyone, I'm what the channel calls me, Grandma Catherine. My name is Catherine Reed. I'm 80 years old, and I'm speaking to you from my little cottage in the quiet hills of upstate New York. It's a peaceful place, a place for reflection. Gosh, and after the life I've lived, I've had a lot to reflect on. This is a story I have kept locked in the deepest chambers of my heart for over 50 years. It is a secret so heavy, so suffocating, that even my own flesh and blood, the very people who were there, do not know the entire truth of it. Not really. I've carried it alone. It's been my burden, my shame, and in a strange way, my armor. I never thought I'd have the courage to speak of it. To be honest, I thought I would take this story to my grave. But then I started watching you all, reading your comments, seeing the community you've built here. You've shown me that sharing a wound is the first step to healing it. So, before I begin this difficult journey back in time, I'd be so grateful if you would please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It might seem like a small thing, but for an old woman about to reopen a 50-year-old wound, your support feels like a warm hand holding mine. It gives me the strength to finally share what I've kept hidden for so long. Knowing you're listening, it makes all the difference. Thank you, my dears. Thank you. My story truly began in the year 1968. Oh, that feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? In some ways, it was. I was a different person then. A different woman. My name was Catherine, yes, but I was lighter. I was hopeful. It all started when I married Robert. Robert Reed. He was a man who could charm the birds from the trees. Gosh, he had a smile that could melt the winter snow. When he looked at you, it felt like you were the only person in the universe. We met at a local dance, and he swept me off my feet, quite literally. I was a young woman then, just 22, full of dreams that were as bright and colorful as the wildflowers that grew in the fields behind my childhood home. My world was simple, and my heart was open. I believed in epic love, in fairy tales, in the kind of forever they wrote about in books. And for a time, I truly thought I had it. Our first few years of marriage were idyllic. That's the only word for it. We lived in a small, 2-bedroom house with a porch swing and a little garden where I grew tomatoes and roses. Robert worked at the local bank, a respectable job, and he was good at it. He was ambitious, driven, and everyone in town thought I was the luckiest woman alive. Catherine, you've caught a good one, they'd say at the market, and I would blush and nod, my heart swelling with pride. Because I believed it too. I really did. He would come home every evening at 6 o'clock sharp, and the moment his car pulled into the driveway, my heart would do a little flutter. He'd bring me a small flower from a neighbor's bush, or a pretty stone he'd found on his walk from the car to the door. Simple, silly things that felt like everything. Back then, Robert was the sun, and I was the little planet that happily revolved around him. His happiness was my happiness. His dreams were my dreams. I lived to make his life perfect. I'd wake up before dawn to press his shirts just right, to pack him a lunch with a little note tucked inside. I kept our home immaculate, a sanctuary from the outside world. I found joy in the domestic, in the quiet rhythm of our life together. It was a simple life, a predictable one, but it was mine. And I loved it. Was it my whole world? Yes, but I didn't know I should want anything more. Then, 5 years into our marriage, our daughter, Amelia, was born. And my world, which I thought was already full, suddenly expanded into a universe of love I had never known was possible. Holding her for the first time, it was a moment suspended in time. She was so small, so perfect, with a little tuft of blonde hair just like her father's. As I looked down at her tiny, wrinkled face, a wave of emotion so powerful washed over me. It felt like I was drowning. It was a love so fierce, so primal, it was almost painful. In that moment, I made a silent vow. I would protect this child with every fiber of my being. I would give her the world. I would be the perfect mother, just as I strived to be the perfect wife. Amelia became the center of our universe. Robert adored her. To him, she was a princess. He'd come home from work, and his face would light up the moment he saw her. He'd toss her into the air, her giggles echoing through our small home like the most beautiful music. He called her his little star. "You're my little star, Amelia," he'd whisper, kissing her forehead. "You're going to shine so brightly one day." And for a long time, she was just that. She was a delightful child. Sweet, affectionate, and so full of life. She had my dark hair, but her father's bright blue eyes, a captivating combination. She was a happy child, always smiling, always singing. Our home was filled with her drawings taped to the refrigerator, her dolls arranged in little tea parties on the living room floor, her laughter. Those years, they were the golden years. We were the perfect family. The Reeds, the handsome, successful father, the devoted, loving mother, and the beautiful, perfect daughter. We were a portrait of happiness, the kind you'd see in a magazine. I devoted my entire existence to Amelia. I was not just a mother, I was her friend, her confidante, her playmate. I taught her how to read, how to ride a bike, how to bake my mother's famous apple pie. We would spend hours in the garden, her little hands patting the soil next to mine. I'd tell her stories about the fairies who lived in the roses, and her eyes would grow wide with wonder. Her joy was my nourishment. Seeing her happy was all I needed. I didn't have a career of my own. I didn't have hobbies outside of the home. My family was my masterpiece, and Amelia was the most cherished part of it. Her father, Robert, set the tone for how she was to be treated. In his eyes, Amelia could do no wrong. If she broke a vase, it was because the table was in a silly place. If she tracked mud through the house, it was because the dirt was simply too tempting for a child's adventurous spirit. He showered her with gifts, with praise, with an almost blinding adoration. She was his pride and joy, the living embodiment of his success. He wanted her to have everything he never had. And I, wanting to be the perfect wife and mother, followed his lead. We created a world for Amelia where she was the sun, and Robert and I were just her loyal, orbiting planets. Who could blame us? It's what you do for your child, isn't it? You give them everything. You build them up. You want them to feel like the most special person in the world. We thought we were giving her the gift of confidence. We thought we were building a foundation of unshakable love. We had no idea we were actually forging a weapon that, one day, she would turn on the very people who built it. We were so blinded by our love, we failed to see the subtle shifts, the tiny cracks forming in the foundation of our perfect family. We were living in a beautiful, sunlit dream, and we had no idea that we were fast asleep. The golden years. Gosh, when you're in them, you think they'll last forever. You believe that happiness is a place you've arrived at, not just a fleeting season. But seasons change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, and then all at once. For us, the first chill of autumn arrived with Amelia's teenage years. It's a difficult time for any child, I know that. It's a whirlwind of hormones and confusion, of trying to figure out who you are separate from your parents. I was prepared for rebellion. I was prepared for slammed doors and moody silences. What I wasn't prepared for was the disdain. At first, it was just little things. Things so small I felt foolish for even letting them bother me. I'd offer an opinion on her homework and she'd sigh, a little puff of air that said, "What would you know?" Her eyes, those beautiful blue eyes that once looked at me with pure adoration, now held a new expression. A cool, dismissive patience. It was the look you give a well-meaning but slightly senile old aunt. I was in my early 40s, and my own daughter was already making me feel ancient and irrelevant. I told myself it was normal. "She's just growing up, Catherine," I'd whisper to myself while washing the dishes, my hands submerged in warm, soapy water. It's a phase. Don't be so sensitive. Robert, of course, saw none of it. Or if he did, he found it amusing. She's got a strong will, that one, he'd say with a proud chuckle, ruffling Amelia's hair. Just like her old man. In his eyes, her defiance wasn't disrespect. It was a sign of character. A sign of the bright, shining star he was so proud of. And she learned very quickly to play that part for him perfectly. With her father, she was still charming, witty, and bright. The little star. But the moment he left the room, the light in her eyes would dim, and all that was left for me was the coldness of a dying ember. I remember one incident so clearly. It was the first time my heart truly fractured. Amelia was 16 and had been invited to her first formal dance at school. I was so excited. I'd spent weeks searching for the perfect dress for her. I didn't have a lot of my own money, you see. Robert handled all the finances. He gave me a household allowance, which was generous enough for groceries and necessities, but it wasn't something I could just dip into for expensive dresses. So, I saved. I skimped on my own needs, putting aside a few dollars here and there from the grocery money, hiding it in an old teapot on the top shelf of the pantry. It felt like my little secret, my special gift for her. Finally, I had enough. I found the most beautiful dress in a boutique downtown. It was a deep, velvety blue, the color of a twilight sky, with tiny, delicate spaghetti straps and a simple, elegant cut. It was modest, but beautiful. When I brought it home, my hands were trembling with excitement. "I have a surprise for you, sweetie," I called out. Amelia came downstairs, texting on that little phone her father had insisted she needed. She barely looked up. "What is it?" I held up the dress, the fabric shimmering under the hallway light. "For the dance," I said, my voice full of pride. "Isn't it beautiful?" She finally looked up from her phone. Her eyes scanned the dress from top to bottom, and a slow, cruel smirk spread across her face. It wasn't a smile. It was a judgment. "Oh, Mother," she said, and the way she said Mother felt like an insult. It was long and drawn out. "Muthirar. Where did you even get this? It's nice. If you're a librarian from the 1950s. Her words felt like a physical slap. All the weeks of saving, the excitement, the love I had poured into that single gesture, it all just curdled in my stomach. Humiliation washed over me, hot and prickly. I thought it was elegant," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "It's old-fashioned," she declared, turning her attention back to her phone, as if the conversation was over, as if I was dismissed. "Ashley's mom is taking her to the city to buy a real dress. Something actually in style." My heart sank like a stone. I stood there, holding this beautiful blue dress that now felt like a cheap, ugly rag. It was a symbol of my taste, my effort, my love, and she had just trampled all over it. That evening, I heard her talking to Robert in the living room. Her voice was light and playful. "Daddy, the school dance is coming up, and I have nothing to wear. Mom tried, but, you know." A little conspiratorial giggle followed. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, listening, my body frozen. I prayed Robert would defend me, that he would say, "Your mother has wonderful taste, and you should be grateful." But that's not what he did. I heard him laugh, a deep, booming sound. "Don't you worry your pretty little head, little star," he said. "We'll go this weekend and get you a proper dress, whatever you want, my treat." Then he walked into the hallway and saw me standing there, the blue dress still draped over my arm. He must have seen the look on my face, the shattered hope in my eyes. A flicker of something, was it guilt? Crossed his face, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by a casual dismissiveness. Now, Kathy," he said, patting my arm as he walked past me towards the kitchen. "You know how teenagers are. Their styles change every 5 minutes. Don't take it so personally." "Don't take it personally." Those words echoed in my head for days. How could I not take it personally? It wasn't about the dress. It was never about the dress. It was about me. My judgment, my value, my place in this family. In that moment, A terrible truth began to dawn on me. I wasn't part of a team of two raising a child. I was a supporting character in the grand story of Robert and his perfect daughter, Amelia. My role was to cook, to clean, to provide the backdrop, but not to have an opinion. Not one that mattered anyway. Little by little, the incidents began to stack up, like stones being placed on my chest one by one. I started to feel a suffocating weight every time I was in a room with them. There was the matter of her grades. Amelia was a smart girl, but she didn't always apply herself. I would try to encourage her to study, to sit with her and review her notes. She would tolerate it for a few minutes before sighing dramatically. "Mother, you don't get it. This is new stuff. It's not like when you were in school." Then, her report card would arrive. A mix of A and C's. I would try to talk to her about the CS, about the importance of trying her best in every subject. "A C is a perfectly fine grade, Amelia," Robert would interrupt, looking over her shoulder. "It shows you're focused on the things that really matter." He would then point to her A in drama class. "See? A star. That's what matters. Who cares about history anyway?" He was trying to build her confidence, I suppose. But what he was really teaching her was that my standards didn't matter. That effort was only required in areas she enjoyed. He was her cheerleader, and I was the nagging, tiresome critic. The gray cloud in her sunny sky. It was a slow, creeping isolation. They had their inside jokes, their shared glances over my head at the dinner table. They would talk about finances, about politics, about the world. And if I tried to join in, Robert would give me a gentle, placating smile. "Don't you worry about all this, honey. It's boring stuff." And Amelia would give a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk. My world, which was once the entire house and the family within it, began to shrink. It shrank until it was just the kitchen, the laundry room, the garden, the places where my labor was needed, but my voice was not. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home, gliding through the hallways, tidying up the lives of the two people who were supposed to be my everything, yet who made me feel like nothing. Was it really all my fault? I would ask myself this late at night, staring at the ceiling, Robert's steady breathing, a quiet rhythm beside me. Was I too sensitive? Was I imagining the coldness in my daughter's tone? Was I being unfair to a husband who provided for me, who never raised his voice, who was, by all outside accounts, a perfect man? This inner monologue became my constant companion. It was a torturous debate between my gut, which was screaming that something was terribly wrong, and my mind, which was desperately trying to rationalize it all away. To believe in the happy family portrait we still presented to the world. The final decisive blow of her high school years came with the college applications. This, I thought, would be something we did together. All three of us. It was the biggest decision of her life. I spent weeks researching state schools, scholarships, and programs that I thought would be a wonderful fit for her. I carefully laid out brochures on the dining room table one evening, excited to talk about the possibilities. "What's all this?" Amelia asked, dropping her backpack on the floor with a thud. "I was thinking we could look at some colleges together," I said, my voice bright with forced enthusiasm. "This one has a wonderful theater program, and it's only a few hours away, so you could still come home on weekends." She and Robert exchanged one of their looks. That silent communication that shut me out completely. "That's sweet, Mom," Amelia said, her tone dripping with condescension. "But Dad and I have already been handling it. I've applied early decision to Northwood." Northwood, died. A private, prestigious university on the other side of the country. A place with a price tag that made my head spin. I looked at Robert, my eyes wide with shock and a dawning sense of betrayal. Northwood. "Robert, we never even discussed this. The cost alone." "I handle the cost, Catherine," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. He wasn't looking at me, but at Amelia, a proud smile on his face. "Our little star deserves the best stage to shine on. We can't have her held back by trivial things like money or distance." Held back. The words were a knife in my heart. He was implying that my practical concerns my desire to keep my daughter somewhat close to home, my role as her mother, were all just obstacles to her brilliant future. Trivial. I just wish I had been part of the conversation, I said, my voice trembling. I could feel the tears welling up, and I hated myself for my weakness. Amelia sighed, a long, exasperated sound. Oh my God, Mother, don't be so dramatic. It's my life. Dad gets it. He believes in me. The implication was clear. And you don't. That night, I didn't just feel like a ghost. I felt like I had died and no one had bothered to tell me. I lay in bed, my back to my husband, and cried silent, bitter tears into my pillow. The foundation of our family hadn't just cracked. A gaping chasm had opened up, and I was on one side, while Robert and Amelia were on the other, their arms linked, looking towards a future that had no real place for me. And I was frozen with fear, because I had absolutely no idea what to do. Who could I even turn to? This perfect family was the only thing I had ever built, and it was turning into my prison. When Amelia left for Northwood, the silence she left behind in the house was a physical weight. It was more than just an absence of sound. It was an absence of purpose. My entire life had been a whirlwind of her needs, her schedule, her presence. Suddenly, the air was still. The house, which had once felt like a cozy nest, now felt like a cavernous, empty museum of a life I used to have. The quiet was so profound that I could hear my own heart beating, a lonely drum in the echoing silence. I tried to fill the void. I threw myself into gardening. My roses had never been so well tended. I organized closets that were already pristine. I tried new, complicated recipes, only to end up eating alone at the big dining table. The two empty chairs on either side of me, feeling like accusations. Robert was busy at the bank, working later hours now, climbing that corporate ladder. He seemed to thrive on the newfound quiet, the lack of domestic chaos. For him, an empty nest was a sign of a job well done. For me, it was just empty. My only lifeline to Amelia, to the world I had known, was the telephone. In the beginning, I'd wait for her call every Sunday evening. The first few weeks, she was good about it. The calls were quick, full of the breathless excitement of a new life. She'd talk about her classes, her new friends, the parties. I would listen, clinging to every word, trying to picture her world. I'd ask questions, simple motherly questions. Are you eating enough, sweetie? Are you getting enough sleep? Is your roommate nice? Yes, Mother. Everything's fine, she'd say, her voice tinged with the slightest edge of impatience, as if my questions were a boring but necessary toll to be paid. The real animated conversation was reserved for her father. When I'd pass the phone to Robert, the entire energy of the call would shift. I could hear her laughter from across the room, bright and genuine. They'd talk about her ambitious professors, her future career plans, the clever things she'd said in a debate. They spoke a language I wasn't fluent in, the language of ambition and the outside world. When Robert hung up the phone, he'd be beaming. She's a pistol, that one, he'd say to me, shaking his head in admiration. She's going to take over the world. He never seemed to notice that she hadn't asked me a single question about my life. Not one. To be fair, what was there to ask? How were the roses today, Mom? Did you dust the good china? My life had become a series of domestic chores that held no interest for a shining star like Amelia. Eventually, the Sunday calls became less regular. Sometimes she'd forget. Sometimes she was too busy with a study group. I would find myself sitting by the phone for hours, my stomach in knots, a mix of hope and dread churning inside me. The dread of not hearing from her, and the hope that this time, she would ask about me. That she would sound like my little girl again. She never did. The calls I began to dread the most were the ones she'd make midweek. They were always for one of two reasons. She needed to talk to her father about money, or she was calling to complain about something. Dad, my laptop just crashed, and I have a huge paper due. I need the new model. Everyone has it. I'd overhear. And Robert would soothe her. Don't you worry, little star. I'll wire the money to your account first thing in the morning. There was never any question, never any budget. My carefully saved teapot money for her dance dress felt like a joke from another lifetime. A pathetic, foolish joke. When she would talk to me, it was often to vent. To complain about a professor who didn't appreciate her genius, or a friend who had betrayed her in some trivial way. I would listen, trying to offer comfort and advice, but my words always seemed to fall flat. "Well, honey, maybe you could try talking to her and explaining how you feel," I'd suggest. A heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "Mother, you don't understand. It's not that simple. It's a different world here." That phrase became her mantra. "You don't understand." And she was right. I didn't. I didn't understand how the sweet child I had raised could become so cold, so dismissive. I didn't understand the casual cruelty in her tone. I didn't understand how she and her father had built a world so exclusive that I, the architect of our family's very foundation, was left outside in the rain, peering in through the window. The holidays were the hardest. She'd come home, and for a few days, the house would feel alive again. But it was a different kind of life. She wasn't coming home to us. She was visiting. She was a celebrity gracing us with her presence. I'd spend days cooking all her favorite foods, making her bedroom a perfect sanctuary. She would walk in, drop her bags, give me a quick air kiss near my cheek, and say, "Thanks, Mom, the house looks great." Then she'd be off, closeted with her father for hours, or out with high school friends who were also home for the break. I was the innkeeper, the maid, the chef. I was a service provider. The love I poured into every meal, into every freshly laundered towel, was rendered invisible. It was expected. It was my function. The crushing humiliation of it all settled deep in my bones, a permanent chill that no warm sweater could ever ward off. It was during her junior year that she brought home Mark. She had told us about him on the phone, of course. Mark was a pre-law student, from a family with money and a summer house in the Hamptons. Robert was ecstatic. "See, Catherine, I told you. She aims for the top. A future lawyer. Our daughter knows her worth." I tried to feel happy. I really did. I wanted to be happy for her. But a cold fear crawled up my spine. I was afraid of meeting this young man who was now the center of my daughter's universe. I was afraid he would look at me with the same eyes she did. And gosh, was I right. They arrived on a Friday afternoon. Mark was handsome, I'll give him that. Tall, confident, with a slick, practiced smile. He shook Robert's hand firmly. "A pleasure to finally meet you, sir. Amelia speaks so highly of you." Then he turned to me. He gave me a brief, limp handshake, his eyes scanning me for just a second before moving on to scan the living room. "Hi there. Nice to meet you. Not Mrs. Reed. Not even Catherine. Just a dismissive hi there, as if I were a piece of the furniture." I had spent 2 days cleaning and cooking. The house smelled of roasted chicken and apple pie. I had set the table with the good china, the one we only use for special occasions. I had tried so hard to make everything perfect. Over dinner, Mark and Robert hit it off immediately. They talked about the stock market, about corporate law, about their golf handicaps. Amelia hung on Mark's every word, her eyes sparkling. She'd occasionally translate for me, in a way. "Mark was just saying, Mother, that the market is really volatile right now. It's probably all Greek to you." She'd say it with a little laugh, as if my ignorance was a charming family anecdote. I felt myself shrinking in my own dining room chair. I tried to join the conversation once. Amelia's grandmother, my mother, lived through the Great Depression. She used to tell me stories about how people lost everything overnight. The three of them looked at me. There was a beat of silence. It was Mark who broke it, with a polite, but utterly condescending smile. "That's fascinating. Really, like a history lesson." He then immediately turned back to Robert. "So, as I was saying about the futures market," and just like that, I was dismissed. My contribution, my attempt to connect my family's past to their present, was treated as a quaint, irrelevant interruption. A history lesson from a living relic. The worst part of the visit came the next day. I walked into the living room to find Amelia and Mark standing by the fireplace, looking at the framed photos on the mantel. Amelia was holding my wedding photo. She was laughing. A quiet, mocking laugh. "Can you believe this dress?" she said to Mark, pointing at my simple, elegant gown. "And my mom's hair. Gosh, it was the 60s, I guess." Mark chuckled. "A different time, babe. A very different time." Then Amelia saw me in the doorway. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look embarrassed. She just put the photo back on the mantel with a careless shrug. "Oh, hi, Mom. We were just admiring the old photos." My heart, which I thought had been fractured so many times it couldn't possibly break anymore, found a new way to shatter. She wasn't just dismissing me in the present. She was mocking my past. She was mocking the young, hopeful woman I used to be. The woman who had believed in fairy tales. The woman who had married her father with a heart full of love. She was taking my memories, my very identity, and turning them into a joke for the amusement of her new, sophisticated boyfriend. That night, after they had gone to bed, I sat in the dark kitchen for a very long time. The house was silent again, but this time it wasn't an empty silence. It was a suffocating one. I felt as if the walls were closing in on me. The years of small slights, of being ignored, of being made to feel stupid and old-fashioned, it all coalesced into a single crushing weight of despair. What had I done wrong? That was the question that haunted me. Had I loved her too much? Or not enough? Had I been too soft? Or too strict? Was this my punishment for making my family my entire world? Perhaps if I'd had my own career, my own life, my own identity outside of being a wife and mother, I wouldn't be in this position. I wouldn't be this fragile, this dependent on their approval. But it was too late for that. My life had been built, and the people it was built for were now casually dismantling it, brick by painful brick. The engagement announcement came a year later, after they graduated. Amelia called, ecstatic. She didn't ask us to marry her, she told us. "We're getting married. Isn't it wonderful? Mark's parents are throwing us a huge engagement party at their club next month." I was the last to know, of course. Mark had already asked Robert for his blessing during a golf trip the previous weekend. It was another secret they had shared, another alliance that excluded me. That's wonderful news, honey," I said, my voice sounding thin and distant to my own ears. And so began the wedding planning. And if I thought I had been made to feel invisible before, I had no idea what was coming. The wedding was not to be a family affair. It was a production. A production orchestrated by Amelia, Mark, and his impossibly chic mother, Eleanor Dortdow. Eleanor was everything I was not. She was thin, impeccably dressed, with a sharp, intelligent face, and a voice that was both smooth as silk and hard as steel. She treated me with a kind of polite, surgical condescension that was far more painful than outright rudeness. They would have meetings, planning sessions, they called them, without me. They chose the venue, the most expensive country club in the state, the caterer, the 10-piece band. I would only find out about the decisions after they were made, usually from Robert. "Kathy, looks like the kids have booked the Silver Lake Country Club. Top-notch place. It's going to be quite the event." And my only designated role, it seemed, was to provide the guest list for my side of the family. When I gave them the list of my cousins and a few old family friends, Amelia scanned it with a frown. "Mother, I don't know half these people. Do we really have to invite Cousin Earl? He's a plumber from Ohio." "He's my first cousin, Amelia," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "He held you when you were a baby." "Fine," she huffed, handing the list to Eleanor, who looked at it as if it were a piece of contaminated evidence. "But they'll have to be seated in the back." The ultimate humiliation came, as perhaps I should have expected, with the dress. The mother of the bride dress. It was the blue dance dress fiasco all over again, but this time on a grand, public scale. Amelia and Eleanor took me shopping. It wasn't a fun, celebratory outing. It was an ordeal. I was a doll to be dressed, a problem to be solved. I would pick out a dress I liked, something in a nice jewel tone perhaps, with a bit of lace, elegant and age-appropriate. "Oh no, Catherine," Eleanor would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. That color is far too vivid. It will clash with the bridal party's champagne-toned palette. Gandune. Mother, that cut is so frumpy, Amelia would chime in. It makes you look 100 years old. They steered me towards racks of beige, gray, and grage dresses. Shapeless, matronly sacks of polyester. They were dresses designed to make a woman fade into the wallpaper. Their message was crystal clear. Your role is to be present, but not seen. To be silent, dowdy, and completely unremarkable. In the end, they found the one. A long-sleeved, high-neck dress in a color I can only describe as sad beige. It fit like a potato sack. I stood in front of the three-way mirror, looking at my reflection. I saw a defeated old woman, her shoulders slumped, her face pale. Beside me, Amelia and Eleanor were beaming. It's perfect, Amelia declared. So appropriate, Eleanor agreed, her eyes giving me a final approving once-over. I felt a wave of nausea. In that moment, something inside me began to curdle, a slow burn of rebellion that I hadn't felt in decades. But I was so practiced in the art of silence, so trained to swallow my own feelings, that I said nothing. I numbly handed over Robert's credit card, which Amelia had given me for the occasion, and bought the beige shroud they had chosen for me. As the wedding day approached, the tension in our house was suffocating. The plans were finalized, the RSVPs were in. The whole affair was becoming a monument to the Reeds and the Pembrokes, Mark's family, success. And I was just a footnote in the program. My spirit was worn down to a nub. I had cried all the tears I had. Now, I was just numb, a hollowed-out shell of the woman I used to be. I thought that this was my rock bottom. I thought the humiliation was complete. I was wrong. The worst was yet to come. It was waiting for me at the altar. The morning of the wedding arrived not with joyful sunshine, but with a heavy, gray, overcast sky that perfectly matched the mood in my soul. I woke up before anyone else, the house still cloaked in a deep, pre-dawn silence. I went to the closet and looked at the dress hanging there. The sad, beige shroud. It looked even worse in the dim light, like a costume for a woman who had already given up on life. Running my hand over the cheap, scratchy fabric, I felt a final, hollow ache. This was it. This was the uniform I was to wear to watch my daughter formally erase me from her life. I put it on. It felt as heavy as a lead blanket. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Her face was a pale mask of exhaustion. Her eyes, which used to be full of life, were dull and empty. I saw what they saw, a frumpy, irrelevant old woman. For years, they had held up a mirror to me that reflected this image, and I had slowly, tragically, started to believe it was true. The house slowly began to buzz with a frantic, joyful energy that I wasn't a part of. Hairdressers and makeup artists arrived, their chatter and laughter filling the rooms. They descended upon Amelia, transforming her from a beautiful young woman into a breathtaking bride. I drifted through the chaos like a ghost, offering coffee that no one drank, sandwiches that no one ate. I was a shadow in the corner of the room, watching. I watched Amelia as she was pampered and praised. I watched her look at her reflection, a triumphant smile on her face. She was the star of the show, the culmination of all of her father's dreams and ambitions. There was no nervousness in her eyes, no flicker of sentimental emotion, only a cool, confident satisfaction. She was getting what she wanted, what she believed she deserved. Robert was in his element. He was dressed in a tailored tuxedo, a proud, beaming smile plastered on his face. He moved through the house like a king overseeing a grand festival in his honor. He clapped the makeup artist on the back, joked with the photographer. He would occasionally catch my eye and give me a quick, distracted smile. "Can you believe it, Kathy? Our little star, she's all grown up." He saw nothing of my pain. He saw only his own pride, reflected in the day's opulence. He was so blinded by the shine of his star, he couldn't see the black hole of my despair right next to him. The car ride to the country club was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I sat in the back of the plush limousine, next to Robert. Amelia was in a separate car with her bridesmaids. Robert talked non-stop about the traffic, about how many important people from his bank were attending, about the cost of the champagne. I said nothing. I just looked out the window at the gray world passing by, the beige dress scratching at my skin, a constant reminder of my role. I felt numb, disassociated, like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. The ceremony was held in a magnificent garden, under a canopy of white roses that must have cost a fortune. Hundreds of people, all dressed in their finest, sat in neat white rows. I was seated in the front row, next to Robert and across the aisle from Eleanor, who looked regal and perfect in a custom-made silver gown. I was the beige blotch in a sea of champagne and silver. Then the music swelled, and Amelia appeared at the end of the aisle, on the arm of her father. Collective gasp went through the crowd. She was stunning. The dress, a creation of silk and lace that had cost more than our first car, was a masterpiece. Her face was a mask of perfect, serene beauty. As Robert walked her down the aisle, his face was a portrait of pure adoration and pride. He was handing over his most prized possession. As they passed me, Amelia's eyes met mine for a fleeting second. There was no warmth, no love, just a quick, almost imperceptible glance that said, "I behave. Don't do anything to embarrass me." And then she was gone, standing at the altar beside Mark. I watched the ceremony as if from a great distance. The minister's words were a meaningless drone. The vows they exchanged, promises of love and honor, felt like a bitter irony. I watched my daughter promise to love and cherish this man, this family, who had so eagerly participated in my humiliation. And I felt nothing. The place in my heart that should have been filled with joy or sadness was just a cold, empty void. The kiss, the applause, the triumphant music as they walked back down the aisle, now husband and wife. It all washed over me. People were standing, cheering, dabbing their eyes. I remained seated for a moment, frozen. Robert had to gently pull on my arm. "Come on, Kathy, picture time." We were herded around by the photographer for what felt like an eternity. Family photos. I was placed at the edge of the group, a beige bookend. I smiled when I was told to smile, my face feeling like a cracking mask. In every photo, Amelia and Robert were in the center, beaming. The perfect father and his perfect daughter. After the photos, as guests began to move towards the cocktail reception, I knew I had one last thing I had to do. One foolish, motherly act. For weeks, I had been carrying a small, velvet box in my purse. Inside was the only thing of real value I owned, a small, antique gold locket on a delicate chain. It had been my mother's and her mother's before her. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't expensive in the way the Pembrokes would understand. But it was my history. It was our history. Inside, I had carefully placed two tiny photos. On one side, a picture of my own mother as a young woman. On the other, a picture of me holding Amelia on the day she was born. My most cherished memory. I saw a brief lull in the chaos. Amelia was standing near the entrance to the reception hall, talking to Mark. Robert had been pulled away by a business associate. This was my chance. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This was stupid. I knew it was stupid, but I had to try. One last time. I walked over to her, my hands trembling as I clutched the small box. "Amelia, honey," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Can I have a word for just a moment?" She turned, an annoyed look flashing across her face before she replaced it with a tight, public smile. Mark gave me a nod that was more of a dismissal. "What is it, Mother?" "We're about to make our entrance." I wanted to give you something." My fingers fumbled with the clasp of the box. I opened it and held it out to her. The gold locket glowed softly against the velvet. "It was my mother's. I wanted you to have it, to have a piece of us, of the women in our family, with you today." Amelia looked down at the locket. Her nose wrinkled, just slightly. It was the same look she'd given the blue dress all those years ago. A look of pure disdain. "Mother," she said, her voice a low, vicious hiss, so only I and a few people nearby could hear. "What on earth is this? It's old. It doesn't go with my dress. It doesn't go with anything. Nah. It's not meant to go with your dress, sweetie," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "It's meant to go with your heart. Just look inside." "I don't want to," she snapped, her eyes flashing with a cold fire. "Why would you do this, Nove, in front of everyone? Are you trying to ruin my day with your tacky, sentimental garbage?" Tacky, sentimental, garbage. The words struck me harder than any physical blow. The locket, my mother, my memory, my love. All of it garbage. And that's when it happened. In a blind surge of frustration and rage at my refusal to simply disappear, my daughter, my only child, raised her hand. The sound of her palm cracking against my cheek echoed in the sudden, horrified silence that fell around us. The sting was sharp, electric, but it was distant. My head snapped to the side, my hair falling across my face. A few guests gasped. I saw Mark's face, a mask of shock and anger. I saw Robert, halfway across the lawn, frozen in place, his face ashen. And I saw Amelia, her hand still raised slightly, her beautiful face contorted with a mixture of fury and a dawning, wide-eyed horror at what she had just done in public. And in that moment, something inside me broke. But it wasn't the kind of breaking that leads to collapse. It was the kind of breaking that shatters a dam. The kind that unleashes a force that has been held back for decades. The numbness, the fog, the suffocating weight of years of swallowed pain. It didn't just disappear. It vaporized in a single, silent, internal explosion of pure, liberating clarity. The physical pain in my cheek was nothing. It was an anchor, a focal point that brought the entire world into sharp, brilliant focus for the first time in my life. The years of being dismissed, of being called old-fashioned, of being treated like a servant, of being called dramatic and sensitive, of being a ghost in my own home. It all rushed through me, not as pain, but as evidence, as proof. And a strange, bubbling sensation started in my chest. It rose up my throat, and it came out of my mouth. Laughter. It wasn't a hysterical laugh. It was low, and it was soft at first, and then it grew louder. It was the laugh of a woman who had just been handed the punchline to the cruelest, longest joke in the world. I straightened up, pushed my hair back from my face, and looked my daughter dead in the eye. The sting on my cheek was a badge of honor. Amelia went pale. The horror on her face deepened into confusion and fear. My laughter was not the reaction she expected. It was not the reaction anyone expected. "Why are you laughing?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you crazy?" I let the laugh subside, and I smiled. A real, genuine smile. And for the first time, she looked truly scared of me. The power dynamic of our entire lives had just shifted on its axis, and we both knew it. "Crazy," I said, my voice eerily calm, yet it carried across the silent, gaping crowd. "Oh no, my darling. I'm not crazy. I'm free." "Down. I took a step closer to her, and she flinched. I looked at her, then at Mark. Then I let my gaze sweep over to Robert, who was now stumbling towards us, his face a mess of panic. "You hit me," I said, not as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. "You hit me for offering you a piece of your history, for wanting you to remember the woman who gave you life." "Mother, please stop," she begged, her eyes darting around at the watching faces. Her humiliation was now complete. "But that's the funny part, you see," I continued, my voice as clear and sharp as a shard of glass. "The part that makes this all so exquisitely absurd." I held up the locket, its gold catching the dull light. "You see this picture?" I opened it, showing the tiny photo of me and her as a newborn. "I am the woman who gave you life. I am the woman who raised you, who fed you, who loved you, more than that life itself. I then turned my gaze fully onto Robert, who had frozen about 10 feet away. But your father, your beloved, perfect daddy. I let the words hang in the air, a poisonous cloud. He likes to pretend he gave you everything. He showered you with money, with praise, with indulgence. He did it to build up his little star, didn't he? Nah. Papa knows. Robert's face was slick with sweat. Catherine, don't. Don't what, Robert? I asked, my smile widening. Don't tell the truth? I've been silent for 25 years. I think my silence is over. I turned back to Amelia. Her face was a canvas of white, stark terror. You want to know a truth, my daughter? A real truth? Not the fairy tale you've been living in. You slapped the only parent in this garden who is actually biologically related to you? A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the onlookers. Mark looked from me to Amelia to Robert, his jaws slack. Eleanor looked like she had been turned to stone. Your father, I said, my voice dropping to a confidential, devastating whisper, is a wonderful man. He's a generous man. He gave you his name. He gave you his money. He gave you his money. He gave you his entire life. But the one thing he couldn't give you was his blood, because you are not his child. The world stopped. Robert let out a sound, a choked, guttural sob. Amelia just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, no sound coming out. That's why he spoiled you, I said, the final pieces clicking into place for everyone to see. That's why he could never say no. It wasn't strength, Amelia. It was guilt. It was fear. Fear that one day you might find out he wasn't your real father, and that you would stop loving him. So he bought your love. He bought it every single day of your life. And he let you treat me like garbage, because my pain was a small price to pay to protect his fragile secret. I looked at my daughter, this stranger with my eyes, her face now a shattered ruin. The pride, the confidence, the disdain, all gone, replaced by a raw, gaping wound of utter devastation. Then I did the last thing they ever expected. I tossed the locket onto the perfectly manicured grass at her feet. Keep it, I said softly. Or don't. It doesn't matter anymore. No. And with that, I turned my back on the wreckage of my daughter's perfect day, on the ruin of my husband's life of lies, and on the shocked faces of the society that had watched me be invisible for so long. I walked away, my head held high, the sting on my cheek fading, replaced by the glorious, terrifying, and exhilarating feeling of absolute, untainted freedom. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in my life, I knew I was walking on my own 2 feet. I didn't run. I walked. There's a difference. Running is about escape, about fear pushing you from behind. Walking, the way I walked that day, is about moving towards something, even if you don't know what it is yet. Each step on the gravel path leading away from that opulent country club was a deliberate act of self-possession. I could feel the shocked stares of the guests on my back, but for the first time they felt irrelevant. Their judgment was no longer my prison. I walked until I reached the main road. I must have been a strange sight. An old woman in a sad beige dress, standing by the side of a highway, my face still bearing the faint red mark of my daughter's hand. I didn't have my purse. I didn't have my phone. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and this newfound, terrifying, and utterly glorious sense of self. Eventually, a taxi driver, a kind man with worried eyes, pulled over and asked if I needed help. I think he thought I was a confused patient who had wandered away from a nursing home. Where to, Mom? He asked gently. And for the first time, I had an answer that was truly my own. I didn't say home. I gave him the name of a town 20 miles away, a place where I knew no one, where I could be anonymous. He drove me to a small, clean motel by the side of the road, and I paid him with the $20 bill I had tucked into my shoe that morning, a little bit of emergency money, just in case. Gosh, I had no idea what an emergency it would be for. That first night alone was the most profound experience of my life. The room was cheap and impersonal. The mattress was lumpy, the blanket was thin, The air smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cleaning solution, and it was the most wonderful sanctuary I had ever known. I took off that horrible beige dress, folded it neatly, and placed it in the trash can. It was a burial. I stood under the hot water of the shower for a very long time, and I felt as if I was washing away not just the grime of the day, but the accumulated residue of 30 years of invisibility. Of being Kathy, the wife. Of being mother. And yarns, and Joby. That night, lying in that lumpy bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, I was just... And it was enough. The calls started the next day. I had to buy a cheap prepaid phone from a corner store. I called one person, my cousin Mary, the one whose plumber husband Amelia had been so ashamed of. I told her a very brief, edited version of what had happened, and without a moment's hesitation, she said, "Where are you? I'm wiring you money right now. You tell me what you need." That simple act of loyalty, of unquestioning support, was a balm to my shattered soul. Robert must have gotten my new number from her. And then the floodgates opened. Voicemails. Dozens of them. At first, they were frantic and angry. "Catherine, what have you done? You've ruined us. You've ruined Amelia's life. You call me back this instant." He was still trying to control the narrative, to put out the fire by blaming the person who had pulled the alarm. Then, as the hours turned into days, the tone of his messages began to change. The anger gave way to a desperate, pleading panic. "Kathy, please. We can fix this. We can say you were overwrought, that you were ill. We can smooth this over. Please, just come home. I need you." "Nee, etami toy. Eranim, etami. Estisal. Edomitarshani, esarcha." He didn't say he loved me. He said he needed me. I was a component, a necessary part of the machinery of his life, and I had just broken it. Listening to his voice, stripped of its usual confident bluster, I felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. He wasn't a monster. He was just a weak man. A man so terrified of losing a love he felt he didn't deserve, that he willingly sacrificed mine. The last voicemail he ever left me came about a week after the wedding. His voice was a hoarse whisper. "Broken. She knows," he said. I told her everything, the truth, about her real father. "He was a boy I knew from before we were married, Catherine. A mistake from your past that I promised to help you bury. I thought I was being noble. I loved her so much. I wanted her to be mine. But it was all built on a lie. She won't look at me, Kathy. She just stares at the wall. Mark left her. His parents had the marriage annulled within 48." He was crying at the end. A deep, racking sob. The sound of a king whose castle had crumbled to dust around him. I deleted the message. I deleted all of them. His confession was not for me. It was for himself. And his pain was a consequence of his own making. It was not my burden to carry anymore. With the money from Mary and a good lawyer she helped me find, I filed for divorce. I didn't ask for much. I didn't want his blood money. I wanted what was rightfully mine. Half of the value of the house I had kept. The assets I had helped him build through my unpaid, invisible labor for 30 years. I wanted my freedom, and I wanted the means to secure it. Robert, broken and exhausted, didn't fight it. He sold the house, our home, and my share was wired to my account. I never saw him or spoke to him again. I heard, through the family grapevine, that he moved to a different state, a smaller man in every sense of the word. And Amelia? I never heard from her directly. Mary told me, months later, that she had a nervous breakdown. That she spent some time in a quiet facility, trying to piece together a self that had been built on lies. Who was she, if not Robert Reed's precious little star? What was her worth, if not her beauty, her ambition, and her connection to powerful men? I imagine her journey has been a difficult one. I truly hope she found some peace. I hope she learned that a person's value isn't in who their father is, or how much money they have, but in their capacity for kindness, for empathy, for love. But her healing, like mine, had to be her own journey. I had given her my whole life once before. I could not give her my new one. With my settlement, I bought this little cottage. It's small. It has a little garden where I grow tomatoes and, yes, roses. But they are my roses. I bought them. I planted them. I tend to them for my own joy. The silence here isn't empty. It's peaceful. It's filled with the sound of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the quiet rhythm of my own contented heart. I've made friends here. I joined a book club. I learned how to paint, badly, but it makes me happy. I discovered that Catherine, the woman I had buried for so long, is actually quite a nice person. I like her. The lesson I learned from all this is a hard one, but it's simple. Love should be a conversation, not a monologue. For 30 years, I loved Robert and Amelia with every fiber of my being. But it was a one-way street. My love was taken. It was consumed. It was expected. It was never reciprocated in the way that truly mattered, with respect. They loved the idea of me, the function I served, but they did not value the person I was. They didn't even know her. I spent so long believing that my worth was tied to how well I served them. I thought their happiness was my responsibility, and that my own feelings were a secondary, trivial concern. That day at the wedding, when my daughter's hand struck my face, it was as if she struck a tuning fork inside my soul. It woke me up. It reminded me that I am not an object. I am not a servant. I am not a ghost. I am a person, and my feelings matter. My history matters. My love, when it is given, is a gift, not an obligation. So now, I want to speak directly to anyone out there who might be listening, who feels the way I did for so long. If you are in a relationship with a partner or a child where you feel invisible, please listen to that feeling. If your love and your labor are treated as an expectation rather than a gift, please know that is not love. That is exploitation. If you are constantly made to feel that your thoughts are silly, your tastes are old-fashioned, or your feelings are dramatic, that is not a partnership. That is control. You are not a supporting character in someone else's story. You are the lead in your own. It is never, ever too late to pick up the pen and start writing your own next chapter. It is terrifying, I know. But the freedom on the other side of that fear is more beautiful than anything you can imagine. Find your voice. Even if it's just a whisper at first. It is the most precious thing you own. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for giving me the space to finally tell it. Before you go, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Your support means the world to all of us here. And if you have a story buried in your own heart, something you've carried in silence, please consider sharing it in the comments below. You don't have to use your real name. Just letting it out, letting others hear you, can be the first step towards a freedom you so richly deserve. Reading them gives all of us strength and reminds us that we are never truly alone. Love you all. This is Grandma Catherine, and I'll see you in the next story.